Ever wonder why some marketing just works? There's a secret sauce for every brand. We can help you find yours. We're IDEA. It's in our name. It's what we do. Find us at theideabrand.com.
Thanks for joining us on the Voice of San Diego podcast in partnership with News Radio 600 Kogo. I am Scott Lewis, the editor-in-chief and voice, and I'm joined by my very best friend in the whole world, Andrew Keatts.
What's up, buddy?
How are you?
Doing okay.
And Sara Libby, she's fine.
Hey, thank you. Appreciate it.
Normally I get that treatment,
Yeah.
and you're the one who's good.
It's fine.
Okay.
All right, coming up today, we have a great show. We have Supervisor Jim Desmond from the county. He came in. We had an interesting conversation with him. Climate change, fossils on mountains. We talked about a lot of different things, transportation. I've watched San Diego Public Affairs for a while now, and there have been some pretty awkward moments, but we had a really top-notch one this week. Andy's going to recap what happened at San Diego Unified School Board meeting on Tuesday. He's our new school board meeting correspondent.
Congrats, bud.
Not my favorite assignment is going to those meetings. That was rough.
You especially like the kids that speak and stuff? Or?
Yeah, I don't.
Great.
It's been a big month for Balboa Park. The Plaza de Panama project is RIP, but something new might be happening on the other side of that little corner of the park. And there's a big SANDAG meeting Friday. It will have happened or will be happening as this show comes out, but we have an inside view of what is coming up. Okay. So all his colleagues called on him to resign. The teachers union did the same. But San Diego School Board trustee Kevin Beiser showed up at a board meeting Tuesday after facing allegations of sexual assault and harassment for weeks. He hadn't been seen. Shows up. He's sitting there next to board member John Lee Evans. And John Lee Evans wanted to remind the crowd that he did not want Beiser to be there.
You may recall that the Board of Education passed a resolution a few weeks ago calling for the immediate resignation of Kevin Beiser, and that resolution still stands. I just don't want anybody to be confused about that.
Were you confused about that? Was anybody there confused about that?
I think everybody in the room was confused about the whole endeavor at that point. It was actually a clarifying moment to some extent. It was also the only acknowledgement at all that something strange was going on.
He didn't say anything.
He did not say anything. They're going through the standard format of a board meeting, and there's a part where every board member can give like a report on whatever
just on
they'd
anything.
like, on anything. And that was John Lee Evans' moment right there, that statement we just heard. They asked Kevin if he wanted to say anything, and he just said, nah. So he said nothing. Mike McQuarrie at that moment, immediately after John Lee Evans' statement, said that he'd like to play a video from a school in his district. It's Mandarin Day. So like John Lee Evans finishes talking, and 7 seconds later there's like footage of people going through traditional Mandarin exercises in a parking lot of a school in northern San Diego County.
Great.
So he's like the guy at the party that's like, how about the Bears?
Yeah, it was. I was just like, I was just looking around the room like, is anybody? Are we done talking about it? That's the whole thing, and it really was. That was the last time anyone addressed that there was a giant elephant standing in the middle of the boardroom.
Wow.
Weren't Beiser and John Lee Evans like sitting uncomfortably close to each other as that statement was read also?
Closer than you and I are sitting right now.
Oh my God.
And not looking at each other. It was surreal. It was surreal. And everybody in the audience, there was like...
Were there knowing glances?
Yeah, there was a lot of knowing glances, a lot of confused looks, a lot of like guffawing under people's breath, and people being like, he actually showed up. Oh my God, this is going to be good. Like you could hear that in the crowd. And then, just like a lot of media there looking around, wondering if they were going to get anything out of this. It was, I don't know. It's one way to handle the whole thing.
It's one way. Now, isn't there some rule that he has to go to board meetings or he could get eventually kicked out? Is that what we're thinking might be going on? Or is he just going to weather it with
that? There is
with
a
silence?
rule that says that about the city council.
Mm-hmm.
But the city charter does not say that about school board.
And for recall, as you've explained, there is no clarity on whether the city's own recall rules apply to the school district, right? And so,
Well, there was no clarity on it, but the interpretation of Michael Vu at this point, he came back and said, yes, it does.
oh, okay. So, but the percentage of signatures you'd have to get to recall him is for the whole city,
For the whole district. For the
the
San
whole
Diego
school
Unified
district.
School
Yeah,
District.
which is big.
Yeah, it ends up being like 88,000 signatures.
That's a lot.
There's a lot of signatures.
And it's a shorter time period, I believe, than a signature campaign for an initiative.
So you'd have to launch it and get 80,000 signatures, and then maybe trigger a vote.
Now, even if there was a recall campaign ready to go, they couldn't. He's not eligible until he's been in office for 6 months from his most recent election.
Oh wow!
So we haven't reached that point yet, anyway. And which it's mid-May, I think.
Yeah, it's coming up.
And now you checked also on his employment. He's a teacher in South Bay, and is he still working?
He is still on leave as of this week, and the district has no expected return date. The third thing that happened this week, I talked to somebody who was representing his city council campaign at the Linda Vista Community Planning Group and told me, I am here on behalf of Kevin Beiser's city council campaign. So apparently that is still going on as well.
Wow.
So he's not teaching, is on the school board, and is running for office, is the current state of affairs.
Quite
as
a
far as-
combo.
yeah.
Not unrelated, though, it looks like if the city of San Diego and San Diego Unified School District does not reform how trustees are elected to that board, the state may. Assemblywoman Shirley Weber has introduced a bill that gives the city and school district 2 years to change or what?
So the bill would change it, but I talked to Weber's office today, and they've decided to make it a 2-year bill, which means that there is some time for the council to pursue this change on its own, and then if it doesn't, that bill would move forward next year as bills do through the process, and so presumably the next January this change would go into effect.
And this would
So it's not like an ultimatum as much as we're giving you enough time to handle this on your own, but it's sitting out here and you know that it's there.
Yeah, otherwise it would be going through the process now, and they decided to continue it for another year, which they have the option to do for all bills. It's what happened to Lorena Gonzalez's bill to reform, the school misconduct complaint process before that got killed. And so, it's unclear whether the council is interested in pursuing this. We talked to Chris Keatts, who said he's still on board, but he sounded kind of wary that the council would be the one to do it. And
let's explain real quick what we're talking about. So the school district almost covers the whole city of San Diego, though does not. And if you want to run for office, you have to run against primary opponents in a neighborhood district, not one neighborhood, but a cluster of neighborhoods in your area. And the top two, finalists from that primary then have to run citywide. So everybody gets to vote on everybody's districts. And so there's been a lot of frustration with that because basically it makes it extremely hard to win, and it takes a lot of money. And frankly, the only group that's really willing to put up that kind of infrastructure and support is the teachers union.
Yeah, I guess to some extent the charter community.
Sure.
Charter has backed some candidates.
Some, and not very well.
Yeah, unsuccessfully.
And so the change would be to make the districts, just like almost all the city councils in the region and such, are that if you run in your district, you have to win in your district, and you have to run citywide.
right.
And Chris Keatts has tilted at this windmill twice, I believe, unsuccessfully.
Mm-hmm.
Both times making the case, I think first just after Measure K was proposed, and then again last summer saying, if the goal of Measure K is to make local elections consistent with state and federal elections, wherein you cannot win outright in a primary, let's carry that logic through our school district and say that the school district elections should look just like city council elections, and the city council has not agreed with him.
Yeah, the case everybody points to is in 2016, Lachey Collins, who was a Shirley Weber staffer, ran in the sub-district, and I went back and looked at the results, and she won by 20 points, which is a huge margin. And then you scale that out to the district-wide or citywide election, and she lost by 9 points because at that point, Sharon Whitehurst Payne had the support of the teachers union, and they poured a lot of resources into that race.
And the city council member from that district, Monica Montgomery, she won that race. She's also spoken out against this as well. So.
Yeah.
That's correct. Yeah. Also, we should also say that Chris Kate and Vivian Moreno yesterday introduced a memo saying that the city council should put up a ballot measure for March 2020 to amend the city charter to allow the San Diego Unified School Board to remove board members by means other than a recall. Basically, they'd be able to take a vote to say that somebody had committed dereliction of duty, which interestingly means if that were to qualify for the ballot and pass next March, then hypothetically, if Beiser does refuse to resign, there could be an avenue for the board, which has passed a resolution saying they want him to resign, but has also said there's nothing else we can do about it. That would potentially no longer be true essentially 1 year from now.
Fascinating. All right. Other news this week, City Hall years ago settled on a plan to redirect cars from the heart of Balboa Park into a new parking garage and then turn what's left into plazas and parkland people could walk around on. The city would pay part of the bill and philanthropists agreed to pay the rest, but they were all kind of stunned a few months ago by new estimates of construction costs after all these delays. They decided to break the project up into phases and went to see if Councilman Chris Ward, who represents that area, represents the park, would support it. And Chris Ward said no. Just like that, after almost a decade of millions of dollars and work done preparing that, it is over. DEAD, RIP. The Plaza de Panama plan.
Are we comfortable with that? Is it dead?
So I've checked with some folks, yeah, because we've heard a lot of these sort of things like, oh, that proposal's dying, and then it's back. The library, I remember when the...
Everything.
Yes.
Everything that's ever happened in this city.
Yeah, that's true. So this one feels, from my understanding, Erwin Jacobs, who's a supporter of Voice San Diego, full disclosure, he's done with this. Okay. I think just going back to the history, Jerry Sanders, former mayor, went to Erwin Jacobs back in like 2009, 2010, said, we need some money for the Plaza de Panama effort to clear cars from this area. And they went back and did some engineering. He came back with this broader plan to kind of create this bridge off of the Laurel Street Cabrillo Bridge into a parking garage and then take all the plazas on top of the surface lots and the roads that go through the middle of the institutions there and turn them into pedestrian plazas. And the parking garage actually adds more, as you have to point out, more parking than was there before. So it's not necessarily clearing the cars out of the park. It's rearranging where they go.
It's a parking management plan.
Right. And so, why did it fail? I think there's a lot of reasons, but basically, let's start with why it came up this way. This is the plan you would come up with if you want to maintain car access to the park. I heard today that there was like 8,000 people that pass through the park on those roadways and stuff every day.
Yeah.
And
so like counting from, say, that stop sign right at the end of the bridge, basically, before you pass through.
Right. And so if you want to maintain their ability to do that, while also not having them there,
right,
then you need to put them somewhere else. And then if you also want to make all the institutions happy so that they can have people access it in the same way.
Yeah, and I think the institutions are in some ways a driving force of looking out for those 8,000 people.
Right. And not just the institutions. We're talking like bridge clubs and little athletic clubs and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah. There are just so many different groups that have a claim to Balboa Park that anything that tries to get some sort of consensus will end up being a Frankenstein of different ideas, because you're just going to have to win over so many different people that you end up adding things and subtracting things to try to congeal some sort of support base.
Yeah. And I think, the Balboa Park Conservancy was created to try to address this, was just created to try to create a leadership system in the park, and they've really just become another one of those. I think when I look back, I remember people talking about like, well, this agency is going to eventually make a deal with the city to literally govern the park, kind of like the Central Park Conservancy. Some other cities have different ways of managing these giant parks, and that just never happened. And now they just kind of focus on like signs and the visitor experience and stuff like that.
Yeah. I wonder, like, could you do like a JPA? Could you do like a new government for the park?
Yeah, exactly. And that's one of the ideas. Apparently there's some more ideas floating around right now of creating a county and city JPA. You could try to create some kind of mayor for the park, some kind of governance system where you could have your voice, but you could also like actually get stuff done. I mean, look, the city is not going to have like a lot of financial leeway in the next few years. This is about as good as it gets as far as finances go.
Yeah.
And the park is going to suffer. You got to think. And so what are we going to do?
I mean, the problems that seem to be facing the park that everything else flows from seem to be that there's not enough money.
Yeah.
And that there's no shared consensus of what are the problems, and therefore what are the best ways to solve them. And so without addressing those two things, all of these different projects seem kind of destined to run into the same shores, because it's like no project is going to win support if people don't have a shared idea of what the problem is that you would assume the project would try to answer.
Yeah.
And that seemed like the problem with this Plaza de Panama plan from the beginning, which was like no one ever agreed that what it was trying to do was something that needed to be done. Now, I don't mean no one, but there was not a broad buy-in of that basic question.
Especially the councilman, Chris Ward, who apparently was given, kind of a veto of it.
Yeah.
So, all right, just over the way, not far from that area, is Inspiration Point. It's not actually a very inspiring area.
Hey-o.
When did you think of that?
I think Lisa thought of it in her story.
Okay.
As one would be obligated to do if writing about this.
Yeah. It's a corner of the park often forgotten. It's on the south side of the park by the Veterans Museum. It features a parking lot, a city storage depot, a dried up fountain. A lot going on
good
there.
Stuff.
The city of San Diego this week, though, put out a request for proposals. Hey, what do you got? Let's put a hotel there, a restaurant. What do you guys want? And they're collecting all those ideas. Basically, they're looking at Mission Bay Park and saying, that's nice. They have a lot of money to do things over there, and that's because hotels pay the rent there. The art museums and stuff don't pay rent in Balboa Park, so we need something like that.
The city council also approved this week a giant roller coaster for SeaWorld in Mission Bay Park. So I'm on team Balboa Park giant roller coaster.
Yeah, or jet skis in the Lily Pond.
Yeah, absolutely. Who says we can't have both?
Right. Those would be uncontroversial ideas. I don't know that people are going to agree that this is even a good idea.
Well,
even before the results.
I mean, everybody agrees they need money.
That's true. That is a thing. But I think people also really disagree that it's okay to profit from the park.
Absolutely.
Well, and historically throughout its existence, remember Keatts Sessions, the famous Keatts Sessions, used to use part of the park for like an orchard.
Yeah.
The part of the park has been used as a dump.
There was a proposal to put a McDonald's in at one point.
Yeah, there's all these. It's like throughout San Diego's history, it's like every 5 years we're like, well, maybe part of the park can be a roller coaster dump, and maybe the rest, it would help pay for the rest of the park.
There is fast food in Balboa Park. It's just in the Balboa Naval Medical Center. I think they have a Dunkin' Donuts and some other things.
That's where Inspiration Point comes from. That when the city gave the Navy that spot for the hospital, they said, okay, this spot, Inspiration Point, we're going to develop that. It's going to be great, and that's the exchange. And they just never did anything with it. It's just a parking lot.
I mean, it is an out-of-the-way area that as much as any part of Balboa Park is not going to be beloved by anyone. So from that perspective, maybe this is something you could actually get something through without too much controversy. But I think the moment you introduce any profitability, you'll run into a lot of the same problems that you ran into with people who didn't like the idea of paid parking in the park.
Yeah, I could envision people like having no idea what this place is and yet nonetheless being outraged by like proposals to change it.
I mean, we had a ballot measure 3 years ago about whether the school that is technically in Balboa Park could stay there.
And that still came up. They're still mad that it's still there and never left. And they're like, if you put a hotel there, it'll never leave either. They'll keep it in the city charter too.
Yeah.
Today, Friday, the day this podcast comes out, the San Diego Association of Governments, a lot of them, right?
A lot of the governments?
Yes, like a lot of people from the governments are coming, right?
I think basically everyone.
Like the whole team.
Yeah.
It's the Avengers of local public affairs.
It's a way to say it.
They're gathering at the 401B Street where the SANDAG meets.
He got you with the Avengers.
Yeah. One question would be like who Hassan would be.
Vision.
Yeah.
Sarah, that was good.
Okay. As many as 150 officials will be present in one room as the staff of SANDAG outlines their new vision. This is we do know it's some kind of bullet list, right?
Yeah, I think so. This is the framework of the framework that we'll see in November, which will be the precursor to the plan that is adopted in 2021.
No wonder they're all showing up.
So when you say it that way, it really is a big day.
It's the platform on which the framework for the discussions about the synergy coming up.
Bingo.
Right. Okay. What might this involve? Like, okay, we are doing a Grand Central Station, something like that?
Yeah, I think we'll start to hear some of that stuff. I think all right, well, so there's one thing that I don't know if it will be included, but is a big thing to watch, which is whether we hear any specific details about how they plan to change Transnet now that they have acknowledged that it doesn't have enough money to build everything.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, that was kind of the easy part. Saying, hey, we don't have enough money to build everything is one thing. Actually going through and deciding which projects are cut and what you'll do with what money you have remaining is something else. So it would be very interesting if we hear about that tomorrow. I don't know that we will.
Mm-hmm.
What I do think we're going to hear is like the big picture ideas that are going to be at the center of whatever the region's new transportation vision is. So that, importantly, can happen agnostic to money. You don't actually have to pay much attention to the fact that you might not have enough money to do all these things.
Now, will they be actually making decisions or just hearing this plan? This is like the first step of the plan.
Info item. This is an info item.
Okay.
But so I think we're going to hear something about a major, like, upfront, short-term investment on how we improve transit in the region. I think that will be one big point. They've organized it as their 5 big moves. So is my understanding of what might be included in some of those 5 big moves. I think there's going to be something about a short-term, immediate focus on how to improve transit. I think that we're going to hear more about Grand Central, whether that is a thing that we're going to do, how it figures into the whole transit network in a way that is more than just a big, new
building,
Abu Dhabi style investment into a major infrastructure apparatus.
When you look at major infrastructure apparatus, apparati, as you described,
apparati. Yeah.
When you look at that now that we've had like several years of experience watching a lot of these, what's the probability of any given big project getting done?
0. 0.
You're not even going to go like 1?
Moving on.
We've never done one. Why would I go 1?
Okay. Fair.
No, that's not true. We're building Mid-Coast right now. It's the biggest thing we've ever built.
Right.
Okay. So 1. So I think we're going to hear about like that, the Grand Central, and maybe other things like it throughout the region that help be a central intake point for a new transit system. I think there will have to be some conversation about what we're going to do about congested freeways. There are too many North County mayors that are upset about the state of their freeway network and not ready to buy in with the urbanist vision that induced demand is real and that expanding freeways is a fool's errand because they'll just get congested again. And so there's going to be some attention paid on what you do with that fact. What I really hope is that we get some more details of how autonomous vehicles or hyperloops or whatever other future tech are something other than buzzwords that we throw around when we have tough decisions to make, and actually how much we're relying on them, if at all, where we're relying on them, if at all, what of those specific things we're relying on, if at all. So maybe some fleshing out those kind of ideas that have been floating around. And then I would imagine some conversation around like 5G. I think increasingly it's become clear that that is a major government undertaking that is going to be a big part of whatever happens in the future of an transportation network.
And I totally understand 5G.
Yeah.
I'm right up.
Clear.
I'm
Well,
clear.
It's
So you know
more
what?
than 4G.
Yeah, you remember.
What is there to understand?
You remember 3G, right?
I do.
We had it, right?
I remember 4G.
And then we got to 4G.
And
Totally understand
faster,
what
better.
it applies to.
I understand why it's such a big deal
Sim-
globally.
Yeah.
And so I'm glad that we were able to communicate why it's such a big deal to our fans and
Exactly.
followers.
The most basic reason it's a big deal.
Oh, are you going to do it?
No, I'm not going to explain 5G. I don't know what it is. But why it's important
Okay.
is if you believe in autonomous vehicles as a major part of any sort of future transportation network, they need to be able to talk to each other.
Essentially,
They need to, for them to talk to each other, we need a greater bandwidth in our communication networks.
got it. Yeah. 5G is like things connected to the internet,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Cool. Well, one of the former North County mayors and now current county supervisor, Jim Desmond, he is one of the key figures in this discussion. He's one of those who's not so into Hassan Akrada's vision about cutting back on freeway expectations and really going all in on some of the future and transit ideas. And he came in to talk about that and more things and his last 100 days in office. You're a pilot too, right?
Yes, I still am. I fly 2 weekends a month. It's my bubble of solitude right now. So I'm able to, no phone calls, no cells, no texts or anything, and keeps me sharp, and I still enjoy it.
And you've been a supervisor now 100 days or so?
Yeah, I guess a little over 100 days. It started January 7th. So
What was what have you learned since you started that kind of surprised you about how things work?
Well, it's as far as being, I was a mayor for 12 years in the city of San Marcos. It's a lot more complicated than being in the mayor. The mayor was, streets and roads and infrastructure, police and fire, parks. There's a lot more to the county. There's 51 different departments, and those are, behavioral health and health and human services are kind of the biggest hurdle or thing to learn about at the county. We didn't have to deal with it that much. And then we have the sheriff's department, we have the jails, we have the the courthouses, we've got the registrar of voters. So they're all things that they're new and different, but it's still fun. I still keep my same principles and priorities, and I'm learning a lot. So like I said, I love learning how things work and then how to make them better.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So let's dive into the San Diego Association of Governments for now.
Okay.
So we had Hassan Akrada on our live podcast a couple weeks ago, and we actually used you and some of your comments recently as a way to sort of talk about some of the things, basically some of your frustrations maybe about the priorities he might have, and your emphasis on, look, we need to finish some things we were promised in the North County and other places to widen freeways. And he kind of said, look, every time I talk to Supervisor Desmond, I say, look, you're not going to get your highway projects or the other things like that, and you need to start to recognize that. Have you started to recognize that, or how would you describe the sort of relationship you've started with him?
Well, to me, it's more about the issues and keeping your promises. I mean, in 2004, SANDAG actually went to the voters and said, here's a list of projects. Here they are all lined out, and I can show this to you in the ballot language. here they are. If you give us this half-cent sales tax for 40 years, we will deliver these projects. We are only 11 years into that 40-year tax. And all of a sudden, we've got now a new set of promises. And the new set of promises, okay, I'm still saying we need, in order to get the new vision or any vision through, we have to have integrity, credibility, and trustworthiness. The voters are not going to vote for another tax upon themselves until we can show we can deliver on what we promised. And I think that is still very fundamental as far as moving SANDAG forward. If SANDAG just thinks they're going to, abandon the last set of promises for these new shiny ones, it's not going to work. I don't think we lose that credibility with the voters, and you just can't keep doing that. And you can't just keep taxing people for the same project. So I have not given up on the fact that we need, in some areas, we still need a working freeway system. We can't really abandon it yet, and particularly in the outer areas of the county. The roads I'm talking about that I'm advocating for, the 78 in San Marcos, or in the 78 North County, which we need HOV lanes would be a benefit for us, and maybe they're technology lanes in the future. The 67 needs 4 lanes. The 67 comes out of Ramona. That's a fire ingress and egress. And then the 52 out in the East County. So these kind of peripheral areas that still are heavily dependent upon roads and freeways. I mean, our economy and jobs depend on these on the freeways. Yes, we can move people, mass transit, I'm not against it, in the core of the city, San Diego, it works very well. You're moving people, but you also need roads and freeways to move goods, to move families. For the mom who's got to take the kid to the orthodontist and then the kids to the soccer games and then going about their regular family business, still need roads and infrastructure. And even the new technology, autonomous cars, autonomous vehicles, are going to be traveling on roads. So I am not ready to give up on the fact that we still need a viable working freeway system in addition to a transit system. To me, it's not one or the other. We still need both. And I think most San Diegans would agree that there's still going to be a need for freeways. And personally, I take transit, but I only take it because it's 5 minutes from my house right now. I moved to Oceanside. It's 5 minutes from my house, and then when I get to the downtown station, I can walk to the county building. Mm-hmm. So it works in some places, but in other places, especially in the northern county and the east county, we still need roads. We still need infrastructure, and I think it's a more of a regional plan as opposed to only one transit centric.
So I think there are basically two forces acting on SANDAG right now. One is money, and the other is these state emissions mandates. Mm-hmm. Let's start for now just on the money side of things. So Hassan came to the board and said, basically, the rumors are true, what you guys have heard in a vague, obscure online blog of some kind that did some reporting on the matter, that we don't have enough money to finish everything in Transnet. And you guys took it well. Board said, we'd rather hear this than continue to get happy talk. But the next step, of course, is actually deciding what gets cut and when that happens and what happens with what money does remain. Because saying that they're out of money over the 40-year period and won't be able to deliver on all the promises is not the same as saying that there's no money at all. That they have some money.
True.
They just don't have all of the money they'll need. So let's focus on the 78, 67, and the 52.
Okay.
Hassan says those projects are not going to get the money that they need, that we promised. And with the Transnet funding realities being what they are, what would be your proposal? You're saying we need to have both highways and transit. In a world with finite resources, what is the solution?
Well, the solution, the money that we don't have right now it was apparent. It was a good wake-up call, but it wasn't during this whole 40-year period that we were always going to have all the money. It still is coming in. The economy has fluctuations. To say that this is the way it's going to be for the next 29 years I think is a fallacy. So I think there's opportunity, and even when Transnet even was in place, there was still in there matching dollars that were going to be coming from other areas, and we relied upon that. And so there's still opportunities for matching dollars to come in. I just think if you have no credibility with the voters on your promises that you made, you are not going to have the credibility for the next set of promises either. So what I would like to see is at least those 3 freeways be taken care of, and they make sure that they get put in place. Because if you want the voters to vote for another tax on themselves for this grander scheme, whatever that is, that's coming out on Friday, you've got no credibility to, it's just broken promises is what you're leaving a trail of. So things aren't easy. No, we don't always have the money, but there are ways to go about and making sure that we're able to make the state mandates. We're able to, build and plan for a transit system, and then and build the freeways at the same time. I mean, if you want to think big and bold, that's bold.
Let me ask you on the second point you made. I want to ask you a series of questions and see if we could get somewhere.
Okay.
So, do you think that climate change is man-made?
I think the climate has been changing since the beginning of time. The climate comes and the climate goes. The Great Lakes, the Great Plains, the Yosemite Valley, all formed by glaciers. They've been gone a long, long time. So you find seashells on mountaintops. You see where it used to be, the land masses were Pangea, and then the land masses all change and move around. So I say we may be a part of the climate change, but I think the only reason we're here and we're still here today is because we as a species learn to adapt to different climates and climate changes. Now, maybe we're exacerbating it towards the end of the warming trend. I don't know that, but I will admit to this. My mother taught me to clean up my messes. So if we're making a mess of the air, we need to clean it up. If we're making a mess of the roads, we need to clean it up. The air that we breathe, we don't want to have poisonous, noxious fumes in there. So I'm okay for greenhouse gases and cleaning up. Who's to blame for climate change? Climate change is going to happen with us or without us.
Do you think it's an existential threat? Like if they put seashells on the mountains here, we would be underwater. Do you think that's an existential threat to us?
I think we need to learn how to adapt to the changing in sea levels. To really think that we're going to stop sea level rising. I mean, the seas have probably, over time, risen and fallen on their own. I mean, the volcanoes are all going off. We need to adapt and learn how to do that. I don't think we're going to stop sea level rising.
Yeah.
The ocean is massive, and we always put ourselves at the center of everything. Everything happens because of us, and so we were the center of the universe, 500 years ago, and we always we put ourselves at the center. And if we are the cause, and like I said, I'll go back to it, is clean up your mess. I'm okay with cleaning up our messes.
Do you think that do you buy the idea that we need to drastically reduce the number of people who travel by cars?
What I think we need to do is have vehicles that don't have the toxic, noxic emissions. I don't think traveling alone in your car is a bad thing. Mm-hmm. Quite frankly, I want to travel in my own pod, where it's an autonomous vehicle. I can text, I can read, and do whatever I'd like. But I don't think a single occupancy vehicle is a bad thing. It's the emissions that are the bad thing. So if we can get engines, or we can get some other form of propulsion, with batteries and electric power and things like that, I think that's wonderful. But I think it's more the emissions, not the people in the vehicle. It's more the emissions that people are worried about, and we don't focus on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting thing though, because when reorienting cities and densifying cities and shifting people's behavior around how they get to work, how do they go to the store, etc., is often described by certain people as very unrealistic, or at least unrealistic in a city like San Diego, or unrealistic in a late American city that was established after the automobile. That maybe that works in Paris and New York, but it's unlikely to work in a city that is new and old and was established around sprawl. And while there's something to that, I think it's also the case that we have transit. We know it works. We know what densifying cities can accomplish. Those are solutions that exist today. They may be difficult to implement, but they are things that exist today. Whereas zero emissions cars, autonomous vehicles, hyperloops are technological leaps that we're working towards but haven't happened yet. And even when they do happen, we'll go through an implementation cycle that, for all we know, might be just as difficult as the implementation cycle of densifying a city and shifting people to transit. Regulatory hurdles may be huge. I know I can't afford a new car just because now there's a new one that has low emissions, right? $30,000, right? It's a big hit. So I wonder what makes you think it would be easier to shift towards that future for lowering emissions as opposed to one where you say, let's allow developers to build as much as they want in around transit stations and start making it easier for people to commute by transit.
Well, I don't think there's a one solution answer. I think, it's kind of a mix or a blend of solutions with technology and with, transportation's not in a vacuum of itself. Unfortunately, we've got a major disconnect between where the jobs are and where the housing is. The traffic, I don't think getting everybody out of their cars and into transit is the answer. There's a mix and there's a blend, and I'm not trying to say everybody should be single occupancy vehicle, but you should at least have that option if that works for you. And quite frankly, transit. I mean, you can't move goods and services on transit. You still need roads to convey those, and for our economy, you can't just shut down the freeways or just let them get as bad as they can possibly be and force people into transit. So. I'm not advocating that this is the one solution. It's going to take a mix and a blend, but which is the approach I've always taken. I'm not anti-transit. I think it works great in the city core.
One of the things that changed at SANDAG was the voting and the weighted vote, and you were notoriously frustrated with how that played out sometimes, and in particular about a discussion about the number of housing units that this region would try to get to. And there was a faction of the board, including the mayor of San Diego, who wanted those numbers to be high and the goal to be high. And you were frustrated with how that process went out. What do you think of the weighted vote, and what do you think of those sort of housing targets? Are those things that just each individual city should have to deal with?
Well, first of all, on the weighted vote, that bill took away the voice of most of the smaller cities. And where at least we had, somewhat of a voice, where now the city of Chula Vista and the city of San Diego and one other city can get whatever they want passed. And so it used to have to get the weighted vote and the tally vote. Well, now it's one, or you had to get both in order for something to pass, which gave everybody more of an equal or balanced vote. And that's the way SANDAG was put together initially. So I think the change really took away a lot of our voices, and so that I was definitely frustrated with that. What was your second question?
And sorry, the second question. Well, let me just follow that real quick.
Okay.
The argument for it would be that in the previous system, some of the people in Chula Vista and San Diego had their vote diluted or their voice diluted. What would you say to them?
I don't think that was the case at all. I mean, it was working very well. It was. I don't think it was more of a solution looking for a problem. There really wasn't a problem with the voting that I saw. I thought it was fairly equally delivered, and I never heard from within SANDAG. We never had the discussion internally amongst ourselves to say, hey, should we change this? Hey, should we look at this? It just came totally from Sacramento and not from our board. I mean, I would have welcomed the discussion. I mean, at least to have that opportunity, but we didn't even get that.
The second part was about the housing goals.
Oh,
There's all these discussions from the state right now about levels of punitive action the state might take if these regions don't hit their housing goals. And there seems to be an interesting divide that kind of breaks down in a way that's not partisan in this region about whether to sort of accept those goals and go for them, or whether that's an improper mandate from the state. Do you think that those goals are achievable as far as the hundreds of thousands of homes they want to build here? Or was it just the idea of having that sort of state demand that you were resisting?
I think I was resisting the higher numbers. In the past, the state would come with a demand, and then our planning directors would all get together from the 18 different cities and say, well, really, this is what our general plan's can handle. This is the number we think it is, and then we would get to the negotiated number. Well, this time that we actually asked staff to go through that same iteration that we had in the past, and there were some cities that says, no, we should just take whatever the state mandated. And quite frankly, I'm a very practical person. I looked at how many housing units have been built in the past, and I forget what the numbers were, but they were very, very low. I mean, we probably built less than a quarter of what the last RENA numbers were. And I'm not sure if that's exactly the right number. But we did not build very many.
That's in the ballpark.
Okay. So about 25%. So to say that all of a sudden, the snap of a fingers or a vote, well, now we're going to build 100%. We're going to take the max number that the state gave us. Just to me, wasn't a practical, common sense solution to that problem.
The county's role in housing. So county has a general plan, right? It cleared off on a substantial number of housing units. I think it's numbers like 50 or 60,000 that haven't been built yet. And yet most of the big developments in the county are requesting general plan amendments, which is developers' right, property rights. You're free to request an amendment to anything you'd like. Does it frustrate you at all that you see more development activity around requests for amendments from the general plan and not attempts to build the units that were already cleared off and had environmental work done for them in the general plan process, which, cost millions of dollars, took 10 years. People put a lot of heart and soul into doing the planning for that. And we kind of skip that and go right to, well, let's develop in these other areas that weren't included in the planning process.
Well, when the county does something, it's a pretty broad stroke across all, especially, when it comes to planning, it comes to zoning. And for the county, I mean, a general plan amendment is not a sin. It's a tool in the toolbox, and it's there because it took 13 years to develop that general plan, and I don't know how many millions of dollars. And quite frankly, I don't see go back and revisiting it during my time as a county supervisor, just because it was so onerous and took so long. But it's a tool in the toolbox so that you can adjust to the times. And quite frankly, I think development in the county, particularly in the unincorporated areas, should go where the infrastructure exists. So along the 15 corridor, is pretty much in District 5, is where the infrastructure already exists. If people are using it all, going up to Temecula, Murrieta, and so the zoning for many of those lots, it might have been 1 for 40 or 2 per 40 or whatever the number was that was for the lower density. But it makes more sense when you're building housing to cluster that housing so that you have less amount of infrastructure, less amount of roads, sewer, whatever it is, if you cluster them. And the only way to cluster them, and then you get, by clustering, then you keep a whole bunch of open space around it. So by clustering, it takes a general plan amendment change. And so, I mean, you could just say, okay, you can build your house here on 5 acre, 5 acre, 5 acre, 5 acre, 5 acre, and do it that way. Or you can bring them together in one smaller area where the houses are closer together. It's more of a neighborhood. So, and that takes a general plan amendment change. So that's really, to me, I don't think it's a bad thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Let me shift topics if that's okay. One of the interesting things the county's dealt with over the last 4 or 5 months is this question of asylum seekers that we had. People literally just being dropped off in the streets of San Diego. You recently supported the motion to sue the administration, the federal government, for doing that, just dropping them off. But you also resisted the discussion about maybe providing a specific building for sheltering them. Can you explain your thinking behind both of those decisions?
Well, on the shelter issue, it came as a board letter that we're going to, for the potential of looking for county buildings to use as a shelter, and then also for the asylum seekers, but also then we were going to ask for the state and federal governments to help us, fund that effort, because the state, wants to be a sanctuary state, but yet they offered no help for any sort of a solution for for a shelter. So it came back with just the shelter and no money. So I voted against it at that point.
It was a fiscal concern.
Yeah, well, to me, it came as a package. As okay, county site plus money from the state and federal government. But we only got one piece of that pie, and to me, that wasn't the whole pie, and I didn't. So I voted against that. And then as far as suing the federal government, I mean, primarily what that was about is the San Diego County taxpayers are being stuck with a bill for the health screenings and then the health service provided to asylum seekers. So because we are the Health and Human Services Agency, we have to, we're providing for the health of San Diego County, San Diego. We have to make sure that the people that are dropped off here, the asylum seekers who are waiting for a court date, don't come with any infectious diseases, and if they do have something, then they go to our hospitals and we pay for it. We pick up the tab on that as well. So the county, just by doing the health screenings, is costing us about $4 million a year to do those health screenings on the asylum seekers. The federal government is just dropping off in the county of San Diego. I don't think, that the federal government or anybody should be able to just put people in here without the proper health screenings or paying for that. Instead, this county of San Diego taxpayers are picking up that bill. And I don't think we should be alone bearing that burden. We should have the federal government, because it is a federal issue and a federal border. They're dropping them off. They're seeking asylum. They've agreed that they can be here, but then we're stuck with the bill for the health screenings.
So essentially, it's an unfunded mandate, basically. It's the government.
Well, it's not really a mandate. It's just we're taking the responsibility on ourselves to say, hey, we got to make sure that we don't have any infectious diseases coming into San Diego County. And the only way we can do that is to make that. The federal government's not making us do it. I mean, but we're doing it on our own. But the fact that we're getting no help or relief from the federal government on that, or the state.
Mm-hmm.
Your colleague, Kristen Gaspar, made a lot of headlines working with the administration, talking with them, visiting with them about some of the concerns about immigration policy and the border. What do you think about the president's priorities on the border, especially, along here with the wall idea and some of those things? How do you think he's done addressing those?
Well, I don't know if it's a physical wall or not, but we need safe and secure borders, and we need an immigration policy that allows people to get into our country if they're seeking asylum and if they're here and they want to work. I think our immigration policy is shot, but I do think we need safe and secure borders.
Mm-hmm. Do you think San Diego has safe and secure borders right now? San Diego County?
I don't, be honest with you, I don't know enough to answer that question. Other than there's still people, I guess, that are able to cross the border and get here. So I think we still have a problem with that. But I don't. I don't have.
I wish more people would just say I don't know sometimes.
Well, I don't know. Yeah, sorry. Well, okay.
Are there other things you see coming with the asylum seekers issue in San Diego, or other priorities you're going to have as we continue to deal with that? I mean, that building is only scheduled for a year. What will you be looking for over the next year?
Well, a task force was formed with Supervisor Fletcher and Supervisor Cox to look into the asylum issue, and I think that is going to be wrapping up sometime in June or July. So I'm hoping they come forward with other ideas. Jewish Family Services is a very resourceful, great organization. That's actually, I think they're the ones that are actually providing a lot of the services at the shelters. So there's going to be a need for another spot, and quite frankly, I think the state or the federal government needs to step up. We've done our share. We gave a building for a year and providing free health screenings to all the asylum seekers. I think it's time the federal government or the state to step up.
One of the things that the county is being asked to do is get more involved in the homeless issue in San Diego, and in particular in providing maybe some more mental health accommodations or beds or other sort of support services. What's your understanding of where they're at and where they're going with that and where you want it to be?
Well, I mean, it's not a quick and easy fix. And so the Health and Human Services is working very hard and very diligently on the homeless issue. I represent North County, and quite frankly, I've taken on the homeless issues in North County. I'm focusing on the city of Oceanside and the city of Fallbrook. City of Fallbrook is a totally unincorporated area. I am the mayor, city council, everything for that entity, and the county is the only government that they have. And actually, I know Fallbrook, there's 48 people homeless in Fallbrook. And unfortunately, they're affecting the downtown businesses. So we're working with the sheriffs. We're working with other organizations to try to bring in more social workers and more programs to help some of the homeless people get back on their feet or get into some type of program. We're actually removing abandoned cars and things like that are in some of the streets and alleyways, and, that some of the homeless are living in. We're also looking at a possibility of transitional housing in Fallbrook and in Oceanside. I think, when you mention the behavioral health issues, we don't have the transitional housing to help the homeless, and particularly behavioral health homeless people on this issue. So if somebody has an episode, I had somebody explain to me once on behavioral health, it's just about every person that is homeless has some sort of behavioral health issue, major or minor. They have some sort of, and then by being homeless, it only exacerbates that issue. And then they deal with it with drugs and alcohol. And then if they have an episode and they need to go to the emergency room, they go to the emergency room, they get stabilized. The emergency, the hospital may keep them for a day or two, and then we put them right back out on the streets. We don't have that transitional housing for them to go into to be housed until they can even afford affordable housing. Because even for affordable housing, you have to have a job, you have to have some sort of income so you can pay some rent. And even in this, so what I'm trying to focus on, and there's some of it being done actually in some pockets, but I'd like to see the county put more focus and emphasis on that transitional housing so that we can help a person, even if they're ready for help, to put them into a housing. Unfortunately, taxpayers are going to be footing the bill for the rent. They're going to be footing the bill for the programs. They're going to be footing the bill for groceries. But to help get these people back onto their feet for the ones that are willing. And unfortunately, we don't have that. It's hard to administer the programs that the county offers when somebody's in a tent or they're homeless or they're living in a riverbed. If we can get them into some sort of transitional housing and then bring them back into the fold with different programs, and then possibly get them into affordable housing. I think there's a big gap missing there.
Thanks for listening to the Voice of San Diego podcast. If you want to follow everything we're doing at Voice, follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. We're at Voice of San Diego on each. If you want to get the politics report I mentioned in the interview, that's at voiceofsandiego.org/politics. You'll get that from us every week as well on Saturdays. I'm Scott Lewis, CEO and editor-in-chief. Andy Keatts is our assistant editor. Sara Libby is the managing editor. And this show is produced by Nate John, Adriana Hildes, and Megan Wood. We'll talk to you next week.